Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Islamic Finance program. My name is Almir Colan. Today we are talking about Islamic finance and Islamic attitude to money and wealth. Join me and my group of friends while we're discussing some of these interesting topics. And if you remember from the last time, we left while discussing one problem that we had during financial crisis, where we are trying to understand what would Islam do differently. So, but before we go into this example of short selling, I wanted to share one little story for the new viewers who are joining us, and that is a story about how sometimes unusual things take over from what is normal and change things upside down. And this story is about kingdom, long time in history. It's not necessarily the true story, but it has some interesting points. And in this kingdom there was a king who was very harsh, and one of his ministers made a mistake. So to punish him, he cut his nose. So he chopped off his nose. Now this minister, during his day work, he would interact with other ministers and members of the government, and everybody started laughing at him. So he came one day to the king and said, "King, please, I can't do this anymore. Everyone is laughing at me. I don't have a nose. What should I do?" So the king ordered every minister to chop their nose, to cut their noses. So now there were all these ministers in the government who didn't have a nose, and now they are interacting with the rest of the society in the town, in the market, and everybody is laughing at them. So these ministers go back to the king and say, "King, if you want us to be a minister, to run the government, to do all of these things, you have to do something about this. Everyone is laughing at us. We can't stand this." So king then ordered everyone in the kingdom for their nose to be chopped off. Everybody in the kingdom. And as new baby were born, they decided to cut their noses. Eventually, over the time, new king was born and they cut his nose as well. Few generations later, and it was common practice. So one day, young man from another kingdom came into the market, and when he walked into the market, he started looking around himself. What is going on here? You know, everyone is without the nose. What happened? So as he was looking at them, observing, other people started laughing at him. Say, "Wow, look at this guy. Where did he come from? He's got a nose. Doesn't he know that he should chop it off and cut it off?" And you know, people were laughing at him, and then he was looking at them. He started laughing at them. "What's going on with you? You know, why would you do something like that?" And in this story, you see that sometimes things that is not natural take over the society, become a habit, become a culture, and if you do what is normal, then you are not normal anymore. So we see that very well in the finance. Normal finance, what it used to be, and business related and all of these things. In fact, if you look at the entire history of the world, there was an interesting book that tracks 5,000 years attitudes of people towards a debt and related issue. And it says that it was almost like consensus of all people of all time, how they felt about these money lenders and what they used to do. However, in the last couple of decades, or a bit more, a bit less, dealing with riba and doing banking and financing the way that we have it today become like the chopped nose. It become a norm. It becomes something normal. So when you come and say, "Look, I don't want to deal with riba," and you know, they say, "How can you do that? That is not normal." For us, not to deal with riba is not normal. So what we are doing here and studying and trying to learn is how normal person should look like, with a full nose and features. And this is the finance. That is the finance that we want to become mainstream. So it goes back to what finance should be. Now, we are tackling one example of short selling in conventional finance to highlight the causes of the crisis that we had in our economy, and we want to see how would Islam handle these things. So if you remember, yesterday we were talking about, technique is called short selling. It allows person to profit from prices going down. And the way, I'm just quickly going to repeat it for those who missed it, is if I have a product, let's say this remote, and I lend it, to someone, for a specific amount of money. So you take this, which was valued initially for $100, and you just pay maybe leasing fee of $2. When the price of this goes down, because you already sold it for $100, you get it from the market for that lower price and return it to the original owner. In that process, what happens is that you sold item that is not yours in reality. Okay? So by selling the item that is not yours and then buying it back when the price was less, you were able to inflate your profit and profit from prices going down. Okay? In Islam, this is not something that is possible, because you cannot sell something that you don't have or you don't own, or it's not in your possession. Okay. Now this specific technique was prohibited after financial crisis, because it is not natural that you profit from something where prices are going down. However, they mostly limited this technique of short selling to the banks, to the financial institutions, because when you drop the prices or drive the prices down of financial institution, it usually increases borrowing costs for them. So they didn't want the bank to suffer, but until recently we see that for the rest of the business they still do short selling. They have other derivatives of this short selling, and what we say in Islam is that why don't you prohibit it in the beginning rather than wait to the end to see what's the result going to be. So if you go back to the global financial crisis, we have seen some use of this and similar technique. Anybody heard about 2008 global financial crisis? Anyone of you knows? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, what do you understand about this global financial crisis? What was some of the causes in your mind?
The global economy at the time, where the stock markets collapsed, and, stuff of that nature.
Yep. Anything else you heard about this market crash?
People that invested lost out a lot of money, and
Do we know what is it that caused this investment to collapse, people to lose money? Do we know anything? Because it's easy to say, oh, it's a riba or this and that, but like, do we sometimes think how deep and how complex this whole problem is? I give you one simple example how this happened. First of all, most of the people would sometimes call this global financial crisis as a subprime mortgage crisis. What that word means is when you give, for example, home loan to the person who cannot afford it, we call that subprime or low doc customer. So somebody who cannot genuinely pay his loans back. Okay, so there were these banks who were going around and getting people to take home loans for the houses. Okay, all right. Okay. So what they were doing, let's say each house is 100. So they were giving them 100. Okay, so they were finding these people and giving them loans. They say, okay, you take these home loans and buy these houses. Most of these people couldn't afford 100. They had very simple job or no income. They call them sometimes ninja generation. No income, job or assets. So these people, what we call subprime. So these people used to take the huge number of these home loans. Now what these bankers did with this, you see, after each time you do this, what you have is income stream in the future of, let's say, I don't know, 200. Okay? So in the future, what they are hoping to get from this with the interest and everything is 200. Okay, now what they do with all of these things, they take this contract, not the asset, nothing. They take this debt, because this is now a debt. Okay? They package this debt in a big box. Okay? So now they put all of these money that is coming into the future. All right? So they say this is now worth $1 billion. Okay? How? I just add these future value, future stream. Okay, so they now come and say, okay, see, we gave money, so we didn't make anything. We just gave money here. We are here. We gave money, boom, there is a product $1 billion worth. How does that work? I give money to the people, and suddenly I have a box worth $1 billion. Isn't this liability when I give money? Isn't this the risk? How do I know what's going to come? Yes?
So basically, it's they are advertising something which they do not have at the moment.
Nothing. This is a complete fiction. There doesn't exist anything. This is just a debt. Okay, so there is a debt here. Okay, and it relies. Let's forget for a minute how haram activity we have riba in. How can you get money from this? Only if everybody pays.
Only.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah? So only way to make money is that everybody pays. Okay? Now, they put this product, they call it collateralized debt obligation. It's just like some sort of fancy name. CDO they call them. CDO. Okay? It's like those derivatives that you hear, you know. Okay, so that they give a cool name, you know, it sounds good. They bring a credit rating agency. And credit rating agency say, this is excellent. You guys are really smart. You've done it. You know, the guy who was doing this, his yearly salary was $100 million a year. How does that work? $100 million a year for a salary. Okay? So they go to investor and they say, look, you see, we have this magic. This is magic. You know, they go, poof, out of nothing we create something. Yes? So we will sell you this billion. What we want from you, just give us 0.8 billion. That's it. And maybe they spend 0.5 billion here to do it. So nice profit for them. And you wait for these people to come and give you the money. All right? Now, what do you think is going to happen? And usually, you know, they give them special rates, maybe 1 or 2%. They call them honeymoon rates, you know, first 2 years, special rates. And then it goes back to normal, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. You know, so these people, you know, maybe first 1 or 2 years they can, by the time they sell this, they can afford these payments. So the money is coming in, and these people are getting profit. So what's going to happen after 2 years? When these guys stop paying and they can't afford it anymore.
The money's not going to be coming in to...
There's no more money.
Yeah.
This billion looks much smaller than. No more billion. It's much, much less. Okay? Now these guys know that. So they have this product, let's call it CDO. Okay? All right? They have this product. They go to the big investment pension funds or investment banks and so on. Now, when they go to them, they say, this is going to be great, you should invest, and they buy it, okay? So they buy it, let's say for 800 millions, okay? Now the person who put it here, he knows, and this is a real case, I'm just not quoting the names, there is a bank, and they had derivative like this, and most of them did the same. So the guy, there was some of these smart ones. They selected sometimes the worst of these. The worst of these from the worst lenders. And they put them in this. So they didn't just even take average ones. Worst one. So the guy who was putting it here, okay, he is what we call shorting. Making short sale on this. Okay. What he is hoping that this will collapse. You remember how we said, how you can, in conventional finance, make money from something going down. So we explained it. That doesn't make sense. It's counterintuitive. So this guy is hoping it will go down. So they have what they call short position. Short. Now, opposite of this guy investor, let's say pension fund. People put their money for a later pension. Now this one is hoping the value will go up. We say this long position, you know, like somebody hoping this value will go up, okay? So now, how does this work? We have two different opinions on this. I'm betting the prices will go down. He is betting the prices will go up, okay? Now, who should know? The guy who puts it together. Now, this hedge fund sometimes don't tell this investor that the people who put this together bet against it. It's same like this. Let's say let's say you have a horse and you feed that horse with chocolate every day. And you want this horse to race. And you say, you know, I'm feeding this chocolate and, you know, Coke, Pepsi to this horse because this is excellent for the horse. When he goes to that race, he will win. That's what I'm doing. Well, that horse, when he goes to the race, he's not going to even be able to walk, let alone run. Okay? So inshallah, keep that thought in mind, and we will get back after the break, inshallah, and continue this case.
I really like the example he gives in that clip about the guy stuck in traffic. You know, he thinks that it's just, it takes it personal, which you know, brings us to the point that a pessimist is very subjective when it comes to negative things that happens in his life.
But for example, if you are talking to me about doing something good in life and you are on the bed of death, that you want to do something for your ummah. This is why we did this program, to make you get your achievable goals before you reach the moment that you will not be able to achieve anything.
SubhanAllah, if I may add, if I have a positive attitude and if I have courage, why it doesn't appear in all the problems that I face? Why it doesn't appear in all what I do in my life? Actually, because you are not responsible enough to control your mindset.
I was reading a study on New York government. They wanted to improve the crime rate. They wanted to lower the crime rate ultimately. And they found that in the subways there was a lot of graffiti, a lot of trash. And just by doing a little thing, like removing the trash and removing the graffiti and making a more clean environment, the crime rate actually lowered. So this shows the power that how little things can really make a big difference.
Welcome back. We are talking about Islamic finance and specific reasons that we have seen for the collapse of global markets. So, going back to our story, we were mentioning example of this in normal language, as if I was feeding a horse with some rubbish products that are not good for the horse and expecting the horse to win a race. So now these people who bet, you know, they think, oh, the Pepsi is the best thing for the horse, let's give it more and he's going to win. So we know this horse is not going to run. So how do I secure the profit to make sure that I make money even when this horse collapses? I then go here and I'm waiting for this to collapse, so I take insurance on this. Okay? So I go to, and which is well known, insurance group, for example, AIG, American Insurance Group, who did these things. I say to them, you know what? I'm going to give you $20, $30, $40 million each year, and you will insure me against this actually collapsing. So in the case this does not give me $1 billion, you will pay me $1 billion. Is that nice?
No.
For them it is, because they know. Actually, then they are praying as soon as this can collapse. They hope, as soon as this collapses, what's going to happen? I'm going to get money. Okay? So now this group, they say, that looks fine to us. After all, it's $1 billion, it's AAA rated, it's beautiful. You are just paying me $50 million a year for nothing.
So you're saying if they collapse, they'll make the money quicker than if they were to
Exactly,
wait it out? Yeah.
exactly. They will make money immediately.
Yeah.
This is like in normal insurance,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about Islamic view of insurance. You cannot take insurance on your neighbor's house.
No.
Why you can't do that?
Because you have no guarantee.
It's not
because
yours.
it's not because it's not your house.
It's not your house. Why would you take insurance on someone else's house?
Yeah.
You see, in finance you can do these things. Now, how they call this? They call it swap. Swap, okay?
Okay.
Okay? What you are swapping is a risk. You take the risk and you take the money.
Yes.
Okay? So now, we see that. Now these people, because this was not regulated, this is what they call over-the-counter derivatives, this was not regulated at all, and over the time, these AIG or other insurance were taking more and more of these things. Nobody knew how much stuff was there. Hundreds of billions. And nobody knew how much they are paying. Now, when you can do something like this and sell it with a profit, okay, so you just created something that is this box that sells for hundreds and billions of dollars, and you can take insurance and everybody seems to be happy, at least for a very, very, very short period of time. Now, what will happen in the market when I can have this incredibly good way of making money? What's going to happen? These bankers will say, give us more of these. Find more people to give them these loans so we can create more of these. So they recruited these, what they call them, bodybuilder salespeople, you know, in the nice, cool car, strong, and they go around neighborhood. Just finding these people, because these are building blocks for this. Finding more people, encouraging them, take the loans. You don't have a work, no job, nothing, doesn't matter, we'll make up stuff. Just get them, because we needed to make more of these. Millions of people, millions, okay? Until one day, people, in about 2007, 2008, they started slowly defaulting. They couldn't anymore repay this. So we started people having the troubles. And suddenly the stream of money dried out. So these people came then to insurance to collect the money. They said, okay, pay us now. Hang on a minute, what's going on? One, second one, third one. More and more and more. Then these guys said, we don't have an ocean of money for free. We are not printing money. It has to come from somewhere. And this is where officially people started to realize how much money you actually insured here. What is going on? And the people realized that we are now facing something very unusual, never seen before. And more firms were exposed to what we call these toxic assets. Toxic, but it was in the box, we couldn't feel the smell, but now more and more of this stuff is coming out. And this was about 2007, 2008. We seen this huge cloud over the economy. And then we sort of call this like a recession and global financial crisis and so on, because these people could not repay this loans anymore. So some of the firms started collapsing and everything going on. You remember what US did? They gave what is called stimulus package. Okay, first one was about $700 billion. Okay, about 100 billion came to these guys, AIG, because they're huge insurance group. Okay, 100 billion came to them. What did they do with this 100? Pay insurance. Pay insurance. So somebody made huge amount of money. In fact, these guys, one of these, Paulson hedge fund, that put this for Goldman Sachs, they make billions of this. And this hedge fund and this investment bank, they were sued by New York Security Commission, and they pay like a couple of $100 million, $500 million, peanuts, to get out of this problem. Okay, now this is what happens in this crisis. Okay, how it sort of collapse. There were other derivatives of this CDO, what they call CDO square, but this is more complicated stuff. Now the same guys who put these products together, they came to Europe and they say, you know what, we're going to do these nice little boxes for your government, Greece government. So you know what, you want to make money, we will sell you, see how we sell future thing here, some future, we will sell you same thing but from your airport profit, what you're going to receive in the future, or from lottery. So the Greek government says, sure, that sounds excellent. That's just what we need. More money we cannot handle. So they started packaging these another swaps. They started selling them, and they were hiding that this as a debt. It was not shown as a debt, so they could take more debt. And then this cheap money translated again in economy, people started buying and doing stuff very irresponsibly, until we have a situation where what we see now in a debt crisis in Europe, governments and everybody else are hugely in the debt. They cannot repay them. So whether you give money to the people who cannot afford it, or you give it to the government that cannot afford it, the result is the same. It's a credit risk. Once you cannot repay, this whole system collapses. Okay, so now, as we work through some of the principles of Islamic finance, we will start to see what are the problems that led us this. How would Islamic finance? Number one, we said you cannot, for example, here, just as a recap, you see in Islam, if you have a debt of 200, you cannot discount this debt to be something else. You see? If you have an amount of money that somebody owes you, you cannot sell that for different amount. As you will see, we have rules that govern discounting and compounding of the money. So we will cover these in later. All right, so if that's clear, let us actually briefly just introduce what is then Islamic finance. So we say that Islamic finance in reality represent any kind of business activity that is consistent with the principles of Islamic law or Sharia. Okay? And it prohibits unethical, immoral, speculative activities, as well as interest, gambling, uncertainty, and so on. Okay. Is there anybody in their sound mind who would say there is something wrong with this? Unethical, immoral, speculative activities. Because this is what the speculation is. This is what speculation is. I'm speculating the prices will go down, you speculate it will go up. We are basically betting on the wrong side, like in the casino. In fact, when they have a hearing, congressional hearing in US, one of the people in the room was, I think, government from Nevada. And if you know Nevada, it's where the Las Vegas is.
Yes.
You're from US. What they do in Las Vegas?
Mainly gambling.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when this guy from Las Vegas heard that they compared this to gambling, he was very offended. You know why he was offended? He said, when you go to Las Vegas and you gamble, you know odds are against you. Here, you have no idea what's going on. So he is the government on the state that runs gambling. And he said, this is what, at least what we do, you know, it's against you. Here, you have no idea what's going on. So imagine if somebody like that tells these bankers, what you're doing is worse than what I'm doing. And I'm living off gambling. What did we make out of this business? Okay. Now also, when we talk about Islamic finance, we say what we want then. It's not just prohibitions. And you will see muamalat in general deals with prohibition. What we want, as a matter of fact, is to encourage entrepreneurship, mutual cooperation, generosity, and spirit of partnership. And through that, we connect capital owners with real economic activities. There's nothing real about this transaction. Just some people sitting in a room, shifting money around, shifting that around, charging each other fees. And imagine the guy is making 100 million. 100 million a year. How do you do that? What exactly did you do here to add any value in economy? Nothing. So encouraging real economic activity that will actually contribute to the welfare of society via commerce, manufacturing, construction, services, building real stuff. The Prophet ﷺ was once asked, what is the best type of a gain? What sort of best profit you can make? And he said ﷺ, that the best is whatever you do with your own hands and every legitimate sale. And the scholars have discussion about what is the thing you do with your own hands. So some say it's a manufacturing, agriculture, this sort of thing. But when you put it all together, you see as a result of it, it's something that is tangible. Whether you run a factory, you do something, the result of it is something real. And then, of course, every legitimate sale, because this product that you have just built with your own hands, that is real in nature, must be sold to make a benefit. And this is what completes that cycle of entrepreneurship. Because you can have a best product, but if it's not selling, you know, it doesn't make sense. As they say, building the mousetrap is still a great skill. You know, you need to have a skill to make it, but selling it is another story. So we want this entrepreneurship that will actually connect capital and real benefits that people have. Yep.
How do you explain entrepreneurship? What is its actual meaning?
All right. Entrepreneurship, meaning of entrepreneurship, there are all of these fancy words that come when you think. The way entrepreneurship works is usually it's connected to people who start something. Okay? They start a business. And it is usually successful business. Many people start stuff, but you have to make it commercially viable. Okay? So entrepreneurs are really visionaries, like leaders, who start businesses and are able to mobilize resources, whether it's financial, human resources, some skills, and they have this drive, like what you see in the companions. They were very entrepreneurial. They were not afraid to start, to do. As you will see, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, when he came to Medina, and we will talk about that a little bit later, he said, show me the market, you know, and he wanted to take on these challenges, and that's why we're going to study this mindset, which is very critical for Islamic finance, to have that leadership vision, you know, and we know, as a shepherd, for example, one of the as some of my sheikh explained to me, you see, when we say everyone is shepherd and responsible, you see, one of the function of the shepherd is to recognize opportunity far, because he has advantage over the, you know, the flock. He can see the green on the horizon, so he can see them. Now, to lead them, you know, you usually have a couple of functions that he would do. One is to take care of the weak, gather those who are lost. But one of the most important one is eventually to lead the strong ones and those others in that direction. So to provide that direction, to provide whatever is needed. So when you talk about business, using these different opportunities and understanding to capture. And that is very critical, because the benefit flows enormously in the society. From few people, look at any business that started as a small and now grow big. For instance, Rajihi Bank. Sheikh Rajihi started as a very young man, just buying and selling currencies. He didn't have much complicated idea on a bank. You know, Rajihi Bank is one of the biggest bank in the Muslim world. So he started this very simple operation. His box now, where he was trading currencies, is still in museum. You can see it. Okay, so he started very simple. Then he started building the business, and today it became one of the largest bank in Muslim world. His personal wealth went from $0 to $7.7 billion, and he's now 80s. He donated everything. All of the wealth he gave it to the children and waqf as a charity. Okay, he gave it all up. Now, usually when I talk about this thing, what is important to note is that he's still active as ever. So he still works. He opened the poultry farms, organic farming, all of these things. So you see, that is entrepreneur. He employed thousands of people, solved problems, huge. Riba means it's a war with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Huge problem. So he's solving the problem for people. And this is entrepreneurship. This is what we're talking about. This is what we want to see from people. And can only work when we go and take a risk. Have a skin, what they say, skin in the game. I take some risk, I go into business, I do things. And I learn from that. So inshallah, after the break, we are going to continue about some of these key principles of Islamic finance.
This is our duty. This is something that we need to do. With whatever language that we know, we need to understand the Quran. We need to get to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, so that we will be steadfast on the deen of Islam. That's why the forgiveness is mentioned in so many verses in the Quran, in so many different ways and means, by the mercy of Allah, that the person would gain such a great level, and that is to be forgiven. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him speak clearly, miraculously in front of everyone, to defend the honor and the dignity of Maryam, the mother of Jesus, the best of all women. And the truth is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship, and He's the creator of the heavens and earth.
Welcome back. We are talking about Islamic finance, and join me with my friends when we're discussing these principles of Islam as they relate to the wealth and finance and so on. In this part, we're going to discuss a little bit about some of the key principles of Islamic finance. So, number one, most of people know is that interest or riba is prohibited. That is one of the key principles. And in one of our later lectures, we will go much more deeply discussing this issue. Also, gharar, as uncertainty or speculation, is another key prohibitions that we see in Islam. After that, any kind of asset class that is related to things that are in itself haram, like gambling or alcohol, we'll see it is prohibited. After that, because this is trade-based finance, as we will see that it is different from riba because it involves underlying assets. And lastly, we want to have banks and financial institutions to share some of this risk, because the reality is that you shouldn't be getting something for nothing. If you are divorced from the risk, as you can see in our case, the reason why these banks were able to make so huge profit and destroy our economy is because they were removed from the risk. Underlying risk was not there. There were no assets. They were gambling. There was riba involved. So every key principle here and more, selling what you don't have, okay, and so on, was existing here. And it still exists in the industry. So nothing changed as a result of global financial crisis. It's still the same thing. It still can happen. And it's still continuing to happen. Yes, we have a little bit, better situation here and there, and Europe is maybe doing a little bit better. Central bank is stimulating now. And okay, but the causes that led to this are still there. So these are some of the key principles. We will look at them in details, what they mean. Okay, now, somebody might say, give us a break. You're telling us something, these principles, hundreds and hundreds of years old, and they can be actually commercially viable. We can run a business now. This is economy. This is a complex. You see how complex things we have? We have these things. We have Twitter, and how can Islamic finance work with the internet and all of these cool stuff, iPhones? And that's something for the old age. We say, okay, That is a question that many people have in their mind. Will it work? Okay? And sometimes, until people see it with their own eyes, like we saw in Medina, for this, when Muslims established the state and the system, many more people were recognizing what it is. So unlike in Mecca, if you see, it was only a handful of Muslims, because this takes huge intellect, very special purpose to recognize something as an idea in its infancy. So, and usually these are the best in your society. Those who can recognize idea when it is just having a small shape of what is to come. These are the best. But for majority of the people, what they need to do, they will believe it when they see it. Okay, and that's how it is. So what is currently Islamic finance? First of all, it started actually in Egypt. Today's Islamic finance in 60s. However, this operation were not commercially viable. So they were based on good intention, but sometimes you have to have commercial sense into it. Because after all, it's a business. It must be run as a business with a profit and all of these things, as you would expect. Like the other day we were discussing how you like to cook the food. Cooking food, just having halal ingredients, it's not going to make your restaurant work well, isn't it? It's not enough. It probably takes some more skills and the way you prepare food to be attractive, to be a business now. Okay, so it's the same here. Just having Sharia compliant contracts and the way you execute your operation does not necessarily translate in successful bank. So it was only in 70s when Dubai Islamic Bank and Islamic Development Bank started these operations that were more and more in line with Sharia, but also commercially viable. So things started happening. We have seen many other players coming in. In fact, in 1999, we have seen Dow Jones Islamic Market launch their index. We have seen hundreds of new organizations and thousands started offering Islamic finance products. Even the magazines like The Banker, they track 500 top institutions. And in 2011, we have seen a consortium of Islamic banks starting first international Islamic interbank rate, which is to replace what is known as LIBOR, which is a London benchmark for conventional banks. So these are the huge development that we are seeing. And in fact, today, Islamic finance is one of the fastest growing segment of the finance industry. It's the fastest growing segment and growing between 10, 15, up to 20% per annum. Now, it is estimated that it is now worth 1.4 trillion. 1.4 trillion, it's 1,400 billion. Okay. Now, is that a big number? I mean, if you had that much money in your pocket, it would be big, I know that, but on a scale like global scale?
No, it's not.
In fact, when you think about it, Muslims are 6% of the world population, and this is 1% of the finance.
So no, it's not.
It's nothing. You go to the countries like Indonesia. I recently had some students from there who are doing master and PhD in Islamic finance, and we were discussing one of the class. I said, you 30 of you should each run a bank, Islamic one. You have definitely more knowledge than when Sheikh Haji he started his bank. We have all PhDs and master in these things. You should each run a bank. There's 250 million of you, and only 4% of banking in your country is done through Islamic finance institutions. That's just ridiculous. In Malaysia, where you come from, it's with all the other leaders, yet it's only 30%. I don't need to go to other countries. We just, this week, made Sukuk law in Egypt. Can you believe that? Because all of these bombardments on the currency, trying to push it down, to crash it. The banks are scared of what's going on. How they're going to deal with these things? Should we take IMF loans? Should we do this? Should we do that? And we don't have even the law to facilitate Islamic finance. Now, alhamdulillah, things are moving. They are changing. I see sometimes some of these Islamic countries. I was recently in one. 100% Muslims. I'll not mention the name, but they call me to see what can we do about some of these Islamic capital markets for a central bank and other things. They started takaful, they started banking, they started things, and they need some other instruments to do certain things. And you go to the central bank, all the sisters wear hijab. Everywhere in society. In fact, on the airport, when you enter the airport, it says, don't bring with yourself idols, you know, for worship. This is against Islam. No alcohol, no. Then you have a riba-based system. Fully, 100%. You see? So this is what we see now. Muslims in Muslim countries and all around the world are awakening, and they say, hang on a minute. You know what? We are Muslims. We actually want Islam to say something about the way we manage our everything. Everything. So you see the calls to say, okay, give us Islamic alternative for what we have around us, because it's a big deal. So we have some estimates that estimate that this will only intensify. And we see that it's growing rapidly. But what we have to make sure is that as it grows, people understand what is Islamic finance, what it is not, and also what it can be. Because we don't want to develop just some sort of mirror of conventional in the body of Islamic. You know, like one friend of mine was telling me the joke. He says, today, you see all of these so-called experts and so on. What they do is, let's say you have a wine, you know, wine. They take a grapes, they make a wine, okay? And then they go and say, okay, how can we now take alcohol from this wine and sell it to the Muslims? Okay? So ask, why do you do that? Why do you go in such a complicated process to do something that, you know, at the end to get a juice? Take grapes, make a juice. Why do you go juice, grapes, then a wine, then a juice? This doesn't make sense. It's complicated for no reason. But this is what they know. This is what they know. They know how to take it and make it alcohol. They don't know now directly. And we have to learn. So when we develop Islamic finance, we develop it on different characteristics. Okay? So it's working, it's growing, and it is estimated that by some of these rating agencies, it will reach 5 trillion quite soon. Okay? And there is expectation that more and more Muslims will grow. Now, what we need to ask ourselves, how will Muslims who by 2030, according to these projections, will make up 26% of the world, and that is 2.2 billion Muslims by 2030, how will they do their banking? This is what we have to ask ourselves, and all the other things. So there we know that from what we see, that they will more and more want Islamic solutions for these things. Okay? Okay, so I just want to touch on a few things. Let me go to the point. I wanted to talk about something which sometimes people miss. Where does Islamic finance sit in the whole scheme of things? Okay, so we say, when we talk about Sharia, okay, you study Sharia and other related sciences here. What is Sharia? What is Sharia? Because this word sometimes, especially when it comes to the media and this and that, people have different meaning, you know. So you say Sharia compliant finance. So what is Sharia?
Sharia is Islamic system at all costs, and at economy, at ibadah, and so on.
Right. Anybody else want to add?
Basically, it's all the principles that we use going about in doing our dealings, which is according to the Islamic actions, which is according to shown by us by the Quran and the Sunnah.
Yeah. Anybody else? That's all. All is correct. I mean, I'm just trying to get different
the
feel.
law that Allah has asked us to do in our life.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just basically something that, you know, conforms with, you know, Islamic teachings, you know, and it's in principle, you know, under Islam.
So what are some of the sources of this law? What are some of the sources?
Yeah. Quran and Sunnah.
Quran, Sunnah, Ijma.
Sure.
Yeah.
And analogy. realizing.
So at the end, it comes down, then after we analyze all of this, it comes down from its sources as some set of rules. Okay? It's a set of rules that define certain prohibitions, recommendations, clarifications, and so on. Okay? So it gives us rules. Okay? Now, when scholars talk about Sharia, some of the aims, when they analyze, what are some of the aims that the Sharia trying to protect? Okay, so some of these, as you can see, is preservation of our deen, way of life, or sometimes they translate as religion, but we discuss what is the deen. So what Sharia gives us to preserve that deen, for example? What are some of the actions that we do to preserve that deen?
Basically, our interactions, our dealings with our family members, with our partners in business, with our day-to-day buying and selling, basically
all of these things.
All of these things.
So there are 5 of these things, and one of them is the wealth. So in our next episode, what we're going to see is 1 out of 5 of maqasid, of aim of the Sharia, is the preservation of the wealth. So next time we're going to discuss this in a bit more detail. So I hope you can join us next time when we continue this discussion. Assalamu alaikum.